lawyer. Let's bring in our panel. Joining me at the table, Associated Press White House reporter Jonathan Lemire, chairman of the American Conservative Union Matt Schlapp, MSNBC political analyst Elise Jordan, former Undersecretary of State for Diplomacy and Public Affairs Rick Stengel, also an MSNBC analyst, and Philip Rucker is being held hostage for as long as he'll stay with me today because he wrote this titillating story. Matt Schlapp, let me get you to weigh in. Well, I told you I'd pour something else in your cup if you needed it. But let me ask you about sort of what seem to be the twin problems for this White House. One, every debacle has a Russia tie-in, and two, just the complete and utter incompetence with which incoming crises are handled.
Look, politics is so much different from business. When you're in business and the lawyers are swarming, you hold everything close and you say nothing. In politics, your audience in the end, yes, there's legal implications to what you say and do. But in the end, in a democracy, in a republic, it's the American people you're talking to. And the extent to which it's drip, 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 things you say happen one way, you find out later they happened another way. What that does is that eats at your credibility. So the advice that I certainly would give very constantly to people in this situation is get it all out. It looks like, from what I read, maybe that conversation, of course, was happening amongst principals in the West Wing, but get it all out. When you have a special counsel, it all comes out. Right. It all comes out eventually. And so put it out there, give an honest answer. The American people are fair. The one thing that's true in all this is that there's no growing evidence to any collusion in the campaign.
Well, that's not true. I mean, the growing evidence, I mean, we learned from the Washington Post today that so you're not disturbed that the president dictated a lie?
I don't want to get into me being the confessor of the president and all these things. My advice to them is to get it all out and shoot straight. One of his supporters,
are you disturbed by Philip Rucker's report that the president directed a statement? I mean, Lindsey Graham was able to say, yeah, it was misleading and he jeopardized his son. Are you not disturbed that the president directed a lie?
You can characterize it. I think what's best for them,
what's true about it?
I think what's best for them to do is to get at the full truth.
Wait. Is there anything true about the statement?
From what I read, absolutely.
What's true about the statement does not paint a true and full picture of what happened in that meeting.
Well, that's a different story. I think that's right. That's why they're
oh my God! I hope you're not on the record accusing Bill Clinton of parsing a statement.
Nicole,
I mean, are you parsing saying because adoption's also no? Because you can't sit here and lie.
Let me answer the question.
Go ahead.
I'm not sitting here and lying. My advice to them all along is to get everything out immediately. Clearly, that statement and the emails behind it came out.
The president directed a lie. How do you feel about that?
The president did not tell the full story, that's for sure. And if he dictated it, you're saying he dictated it. Philip's saying in his reporting.
No one is denying that they dictated it.
I am, because I don't think you know that, because
I talked to 4 people at the White House today.
Were they on that plane?
Well, 3 of them were, and
they were on that plane. They said
Sarah Huckabee Sanders did not deny Philip's reporting from the White House.
That's right, and I watched her answer, and I think her answer is very credible, which is the president did have a hand in crafting this statement. You're jumping and saying he dictated the statement. I know Philip's.
What was his intent? That's what I'm curious what you think about that. What was the president's intent?
I can't get inside the president's head. Can you? Even Philip is saying he can't get inside the president's head.
I can try. I mean, he was trying to be deceptive. I agree with you about the difference between politics and business. But by the way, business PR 101 is exactly what you said. Get it all out immediately if anything is going to come out early. But his whole career, he just shows a little bit each time because he thinks he can deceive part of the way. It's a little bit like what Vladimir Putin does too, which is that the incremental lie
Should we stick to the facts?
Well,
if we're going to stick to the facts, that's off. Look, I'm not going to play this 8-on-1, okay? Look, if we're going to get subjective on what all of our opinions are and what we think Trump did, okay? That's an interesting way to approach it.
Well, but it's not subjective in the sense that prosecutors need to find out whether there's corrupt intent. Was there corrupt intent?
They're going to do that. And you had an Obama prosecutor on here who explained what she thought would be in play and what wouldn't be in play. And that's going to happen in this whole investigation. Here's the thing, which is I guess we're all in this business where we say to the American people what's happening along the way, but it's all going to come out. And the special counsel...
Matt, I guess my objection to what you're saying is that no one in the White House has asked the Washington Post to correct their story. That's my understanding, Philip Rucker. Is that the case as of this hour?
That's correct, and I can just tell you guys that our findings in the story, and specifically the phrase that the president dictated this statement, is based on our reporting with a number of advisors, a number of sources from a number of different walks of life as it relates to this story. So we're very confident in the reporting.
And let me just add to Philip's reporting, because I feel like we have to at least agree on that. You can disagree that the facts represent some sort of troubling development for the White House, but the White House isn't even disagreeing with the facts as they're detailed in Philip Brooker's story.
What I heard Sarah Huckabee Sanders say would characterize what happened somewhat differently than how Philip characterized it. And I guess my only question, which I wouldn't ask you to give up a source, is that if you said the president dictated it, that means you were standing or sitting right there when that dictation happened. And that source would have to be that person.
Or you talked to other people, and you don't know that it wasn't. Elise Jordan, weigh in on the fact that the sort of what ties all these stories together, and the reason the story is relevant to the bigger question about Russia, is that the Don Jr. cover story, which unraveled, I think even Matt, you would acknowledge, it unraveled within 24 hours. The White House had for an explanation.
Well, the emails came out later, and they would have been smarter to put it all out at once.
Right. So the story that unraveled, but the cover story is the same story that we understood Trump to have had a conversation with Vladimir Putin about the day before. Coincidence?
I just find President Trump's attitude towards Russia really baffling. He takes such offense with any slight. We all know how he doesn't hesitate to fire back at his opponents immediately on Twitter. But when it comes to Russia, they're just immune. And, you know, just a couple of days ago, Russia said, you know, Putin expelled over 700 of our diplomats, and Russian workers at our embassy are no longer going to be allowed to work for the U.S. Embassy in Moscow. Nothing.
But why?
So why is
why are they taking that action?
Because
he's apparently signing this bill.
Which he hasn't yet.
Why hasn't he also signed the bill yet?
Jonathan, let me bring you in.
Why isn't he? I know.
I need Karnak for these questions.
I know, but
we're getting you some good Russian shot. Where do you think sort of the check will come from, if there is one, on this president, just to not create self-inflicted crises?
I think on all these questions, the American people are fair, and they judge politicians on what they think their motives are. In this case, you're right. The Fraternal Order of Police came out and endorsed President Trump. They liked a lot of his policies when it came to law and order and the police. This was a joke. Nobody's laughing at the joke. I agree with much of your saying, but there's also nothing wrong with the idea of being tough on crime. Here's the irony in all
Wait, Matt, so I have to, that's not what he said.
Yes, that's what I said.
He wasn't talking about being tough on crime. He was talking about being tough.
I'm not endorsing his statement. I'm simply saying when you go back
to... You seem to be normalizing it or excusing it. Are you excusing that as a joke?
I'm not going to play the role in this panel as the person that says when Donald Trump is moral and immoral. I am here
I didn't start the conversation that way. I said these are people inclined to like
Let me get to my point. My point is this, which is it's ironic when you have a special counsel who's investigating you. And what you realize in these cases that, guess what? There should be guardrails for prosecutors. And there should be guardrails for law enforcement. And when you're the victim of those entities, when they do wrong, you realize why you have those guardrails, and they're absolutely needed. Anybody who's been tortured by a prosecutor, as many people have, unfairly realize that.
I didn't follow your chain. What do you think about the president's comments about roughing up people that are being...
They said, Sarah Huckabee Sanders said it from the...
I'm asking you what you think. Why do you keep quoting Sarah Sanders?
Well, because I thought that the comment was out of line, and she said it was a joke, and I said no one's laughing. It's funny. I don't think you should joke about these things.
Okay. Jonathan Lemire, how does the president keep sort of ending up in these situations in front of largely friendly audiences, the Boy Scouts, the police, as Matt and Rick have both pointed out, groups largely inclined to like him, where the groups end up having to rebuke him?
He does not adhere to the norms of the presidency. We heard versions of this speech on the campaign. He'd make similar comments that you could interpret as a joke or not, and he continues to do that now that he's in the office, perhaps not fully grasping that his words carry far more weight now. He still does not have a filter. He is still, you know, espousing this old world view, whether it's from the 60s or from the 1980s when he became a national figure for the first time here in New York, a city that at the time was high crime, was ravaged by the drug epidemic, that really sort of set in his mind some very black and white definitions of law enforcement. And he has not modernized some of those beliefs, and he's certainly not going to, you know, sort of caution or soften what he's going to say just now because he's in the Oval Office.
I want to ask you about his supporters, something I don't think we'll fight about. Do you think he's afraid that if he does any of this, if he pulls it back even a hair, that thing that his supporters love about him, all that irreverence, wears off?
Once again, I don't know. I do know this, which is people do like the fact that he's unplugged. And it's like all those people who say things that are amazingly witty or insightful, at times they're over the line. And he definitely lives on this line. And there are times when what he says is incredibly offensive to folks, but there are other times when people say he's saying what's in his heart. And by the way, you know, I think I look at this head of the DEA and I look at a different problem, which is this is a career person who they've made acting as one of their problems in the agency, which is they took another, you have a career or a Democrat taking another pot shot at the president when he's low. And it goes back to the reason why I'm glad General Kelly is coming in, which is they have to start to fill these with their allies. You have the FOP and other police groups that are big supporters of President Trump. I didn't see their voice out there. You have to coordinate with your allies when you make misstatements and when you're doing something that's hard on policy. And these are the types of things they've got to tighten up if they're to be successful.
Are you questioning the motives as political that the DEA responded to? You think it's...
Yeah, I thought it sounded awfully political to me. I don't mind the fact
you don't think it's appropriate? Go ahead.
Come on, the president makes a statement. If President Bush or President Obama had made a statement that maybe they wish they could take back, or a joke that wasn't funny, or however you describe it, their own political wouldn't go out. And this is a political job. Remember, the DEA is a political job, or at least should be. It is by statute. And they wouldn't immediately go out and attack their own president.
So you don't think there's any honorable motivation to saying we're not for, we're against
I thought
police
that statement
brutality?
was over.
You think that's only politically motivated?
He wasn't advocating for police brutality.
No, but he has to represent his constituency. I mean, it's just, that's too cynical, it seems to me. In fact, the problem with his remarks is we've come through a period of a couple of years where there's an epidemic of excessive police violence. I mean, we've been reckoning with that all across the country. Excessive police violence, targeted racism, all of these things. So that's the context.
And a lot of cops got shot, too, let's be honest.
Yes, and absolutely. And a president can say, you know, I've seen all of that, and I condemn all of that, but maybe we've gone too far in the opposite direction, and we need to actually be a little more strict about this. That's the way to say it, as opposed to just saying, like, bang some heads and you know, have no restraint. I mean, that's the problem. The problem is the context. He doesn't have history. He's going back to some earlier mindset. I think we're not actually in that much disagreement about it.
I don't either.
So, okay.
All right, we're just... It's General John Kelly's first full day on the job as White House Chief of Staff. There are whispers that one of his first moves, after firing Scaramucci, of course, has been to seal off the Oval Office, limiting the staff's access to the president. But one area that does not seem to be under Kelly's control, Twitter. Because the president was back at it today, thank God, tweeting only the fake news media and Trump enemies want me to stop using social media. 110 million people, only way for me to get the truth out. I, for one, Jonathan, really hope he never stops tweeting.
Every White House reporter agrees with you.
But take us back. I mean, so he announced his new chief of staff on Friday, and we were consumed by the Scaramucci news yesterday. But talk about the Kelly reign so far, what we know.
He certainly has a tall task ahead of him. He was indeed, as you're right. The appointment was made on Friday by Twitter. You know, yesterday, as sort of his first order of business, he sent Scaramucci packing. And now he is starting to make some changes to how the West Wing runs. To this point, the president ran the West Wing like he ran his business. He liked people coming and going from the office. He was very common for him to be in the hallway, and often aides with very conflicting agendas would try to buttonhole him and try to convince him to change his mind on one topic or another. That is not how, as you well know, not how a West Wing usually works, and that General Kelly is trying some of that. He's trying to reduce some of the walk-in access into the Oval Office. He's trying to keep the president on a more regimented schedule in terms of what he's doing and who he's talking to. He has not, of course, cut back on his Twitter just yet. In fact, one could read that tweet as a direction at General Kelly, saying, like, you know, I'm not giving up my Twitter.
Don't rein me in.
Don't take it away from me.
Matt Schlapp, contrary to some reporting, I've heard that Jared and Ivanka are perfectly willing to allow Kelly to be successful to sort of fall into that order that Jonathan just described.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think people get confused on two things, and you know this, Nicole, which is they say the chief of staff is a gatekeeper. Like on the big questions, get the right people in the Oval Office to give the president a couple of different sides on an issue as he has to make a decision, like on these tough decisions leading up to what's going to happen with North Korea. But he's not the scheduler. And I think that's where they've gotten confused over the last 6 months. There's been all this desire to micromanage who gets in and who doesn't get in.
And any commissioned officer technically reports to the president.
That's
just
right.
Simply organized by a chief of staff.
That's exactly right. So the chief of staff comes up with the order to the process, but he's really not the person standing outside the door saying, let me see your ID. But this president likes to hear from a lot of different people, and he likes to talk to his family, which are some of his top advisors. That's not going to change.
Well, something yesterday that I thought was a great idea. Andy Card was on one of the shows, and he suggested that perhaps as a start, the staff secretary approved tweets for President Trump.
Oh, the
there
staff
you go.
secretary.
That'll start a fight. That'll start a fight. We'll keep this going. You can all come back any day. We will debate reining in presidential tweets. I hope we never